Alright, welcome back to the SuperCoach Nuff channel. In this video we're going to look at the NRL SuperCoach stock market going into round 16 of the 2023 season. So the second of the three big buy rounds. Um, there's a few issues, players missing and getting dropped for missing buses and other indiscretions. So I guess we'll go through and have a look at the possible options for this week. But before we do, we'll update the team buy rankings. So this was introduced last week just to look at the teams in terms of how they're positioned with their buys that they have remaining. So as you can see there, the top hasn't changed too much. The Sharks and the Tigers, only have round 17 buy left, and then they play for the rest of the season. So if we can target those players, that's a smart move. The Bulldogs and Eels also play around 16 and 19, but they do have an additional bye that they have to have in the back end of the season. Quite a few teams listed playing this week. So Panthers, Storm, Roosters, Seagulls, Knights all played this week, and their last byes are all in round 19. The one change you'll notice is the Cowboys have moved up a position after having their first bye last week, so they do play this week, which puts them above the Raiders, the Dolphins, the Warriors, and Dragons, who are all on bye this week. And then Souths and Broncos at the bottom of the list. And because this is a big buy round, there's a lot of players out on buy, so to try and streamline the process, we're going to use the buy, keep, sell, avoid method. So basically how it works, you can see there's sort of four categories. We've got the buys for players that are good options for this week and don't have the buy. Keeps for those players that are on a buy or on origin duty, but obviously we want to keep them in our side. Sells are the players that aren't playing this week, so we might as well get rid of them. And the avoids are the players that are playing this week, but probably don't need to be coming into our teams. So hopefully that's helpful. There's a lot of train noise. Apologies if that's coming through the audio. But as always, we'll kick off with the hooker position. And so in terms of the buys this week, I've got Jake Simpkin at the top of the list. So obviously we talked about the Tigers' great buy coverage. And I guess fortunately for him and unfortunately for Api Coruscant, he's out for a few weeks with a broken jaw. So gives Simpkin a good crack at the hooker position. And obviously having been coming off the bench and playing bit part roles with Appy in the side, um, he's really got an opportunity to make some cash as well, which could be very handy for some players. So that's why I've got him as a buyer. I've also got Reed Marnie as a buyer. So Bulldogs do have nice buy coverage, as we know. And his price is just about having bottomed out. So if you're looking for more of a keeper type option for this week, and then obviously one you can hold through to the end of the season, I'd go with Reed Marnie as that top pick. In terms of the holds, I don't think there's too many prizes for guessing here, but Damien Cook, Harry Grant, obviously both playing Origin this week. But if you've got them, you just hang on to them. If you've got both, you might have to make a decision on which one to sell. And it is a bit of a toss of the coin. I've had Harry Grant all year, so um, a bit of Queensland bias there perhaps. But I guess the other advantage is we know that Damien Cook's still got two buys in the back end of the season to negotiate on top of playing Origin. So, yeah, I guess if you had both, I'd probably sell Cook. But if you've got Cook and anyone else, I would definitely consider holding. On the sell category, Reece Robson at the top of this list. So congratulations on making the New South Wales team, Reece, but you cut from the side. So I do have Reece Robson. Yeah, so I think he's a sell. You can get Reed Marnie, you can get Jake Simpkin, and they'll do that job over the buys, and then obviously if you want to get Cook and Grant for the run home, that's easy enough to do from there. Jeremy Marshall King's, been a really great pod, but seems a bit having an issue with his shoulder. So I think, it's probably a time to get out of him now if you do have him in your side. And then on the avoids list, so Blake Brayley, I guess if we're using the logic of what we just talked about, with Simkin and Marnie playing big minutes, good buy coverage, you might think Blake Brayley's in that category. Um, I guess I'd probably have him third on that list, so therefore I've got him in the avoid. And Brendan Hand, so Parramatta with their nice buy coverage, playing big minutes, sounds like another option instead of Jake Simkin. But Josh Hodgson should be back next week, is the latest report. So it's probably not a long-term play to bring in Hand. So for that reason, I'd have Simkin over him. Into the front row forward position, and I guess the top buy I've got there is Tavita Pangai Jr. So was obviously not overly wrapped with his own Origin performance. Probably also let the team down a bit on the weekend against the Eels, trying a bit too hard to push his name up for selection. Um, so hopefully, he sort of sat and thought about it. Hopefully, Ciraldo's had a bit of a word in his ear about, don't go chasing the big play. Let it come to you. And for that reason, he's fairly cheap. He's got the dual position swing. The buy coverage is nice. I guess also didn't help a couple of our pod shouts for the buys around Stefano Udikamanu and Royce Hunt. Both now not available for different reasons. Stefano obviously getting the gig for New South Wales. Royce Hunt unfortunately getting injured. Uh, so I guess if you are looking to bring in a front rower this week, he'd be my number one target. If you are looking for a downgrade option, I still like Semi Alafanu from Manly. Didn't play the 80 last week, which is a little bit of a concern, but I guess the seems to basically have that job wrapped up for the time being. I believe Tuolangi's still a couple of weeks away, so you could use him until round 19, and then if you can hold him as your front row forward four, that would be fine. If you wanted to, get rid of him for enough, that might be fine too. But he should have dual position by then too, so he can provide that little bit of extra flexibility in your forwards. On the holds, so obviously the obvious holds are your Payne Haas's and Big Tino. If you've got them, you hold them. But I thought I'd throw out a couple of more sort of like left wing options or right wing options, far out options in Joey Tarpany and Tohu Harris. So both missing this week, but both will play around 19. Both have the dual position flexibility. So, I think if you've got those sort of guys and you can afford to hold, I would definitely recommend holding them. Uh, on the sell list, I've got Adam Fanua Blake. So, I just said hold Haas, hold Big Tino. If I had to pick one of the big guns to look at trading out, I'd pick Fanua Blake just because he did have a slightly down week last week. So, he'll have a high break even. His cash will dip. Um, and, I really think the front row is going to be Payne Haas and Big Tino. That's the front row that most people will be trying to finish their teams with. If you can afford to hold Fanua Blake as well, fair play to you. But I'd prefer the flexibility of like your Tohu Harris and that sort of dual position type option. And Corey Horsburgh has found his way into the Queensland squad at number 19. So that would suggest he's only an injury away from not being available for round 19, which is, I guess, a reason why a lot of people would have him. For a similar price, you can get Joey Tarpany, who's definitely going to be playing in that round, and uh, as a general rule, offers a bit more consistency in his scoring. And saying that, I probably haven't put enough respect on Horsburgh's scoring this year. He has done well, but out of those premium type options, he's the one we can afford to chop. And then on the avoid list, I've got Regan Campbell Gillard at the top of the list. Obviously, will be available for the buy rounds. And even assuming, if New South Wales doesn't win game two in Brisbane, you'd imagine that they're going to try to test the younger guys out. So you'd imagine Stefano would get a second chance. Might look at bringing in Spencer Leniu, perhaps. So for that reason, I think RCG will be available even for round 19, but I just don't think the scoring's there, so that's why he's on the avoid list. Antonio Paseka, so surprisingly, is I think sitting sixth overall from memory for points scored this season. But aside from being available this week, there's not too much upside to the pick, so I'd avoid at this point if you're looking to get Paseka into your side. Excuse me. On to the second row options. John Bateman at the top of the list. So Tigers and Sharks, we talked about targeting. So it looks like he's playing a nice role there in the lock forward spot for the Tigers. And particularly, you'd think with Luke Brooks missing for a bit, he might even take on a bit more responsibility in the try assisting department and that sort of thing. Maybe wishful thinking. It may actually be a disadvantage for him to be ball playing more. But he's a competitor, and we've just been waiting for his form to turn around after the slow preseason and whatnot. And it looks like that's here now. Also got Teague Wilton on the buy list. Sharks also have great buy coverage. Obviously, if you can afford Nikora, I would always suggest getting Britton Nikora. He's an absolute gun. But as a nice value pick, I think Teague Wilton, his price has bottomed out now at about 560 from memory. I don't have the numbers here on the screen. But yeah, really nice option. Doesn't play around 17, but then should play every other game for the rest of the season. So you could hold him on the run home as like a second row 4 type option, even a 5 if you've got a bit of depth about that position, and he wouldn't let you down. On the hold list, I've got David Fafita, the tank. He's an absolute hold. He will dip in price, but you'd imagine that he'll be back to his barnstorming best next week, assuming he gets through Origin okay. And Isaiah Yeo's another hold. Obviously, isn't playing this week because he plays 13 for New South Wales. But the guns like that, you try to find a way to hold them when you can. On the sell list, so I know he's on the buy this week, but Kaloa Matangi, is probably a reluctant sell, just given that he's in the Origin squad, and as we talked about, if New South Wales win, they'll obviously keep the same side, but if they lose, they might want to try to play some of these youngsters, and he's a prime target, for someone like a Tyson Frizzell playing on that right edge. Pretty sure he plays right edge, or am I thinking of Olaquatu? I don't know. I haven't studied South that closely this year, to be honest. But yeah, it's sort of one, if you could hold him, yeah, okay, but I think, out of those sort of options, he's the one that needs to go. Again, South's buy coverage post Origin isn't ideal either. And Eli Katoa, so had an eye injury, I believe, last week, so isn't named to play this week. Big break even. So yeah, I guess his main sort of pod opportunity was in this round, and it's now evaporated, unfortunately. So a reluctant sell there also. And on the avoid list, I've got Scotty Sorensen at the top of the list, so turned up again on the weekend, which would definitely tempt some people. But, again, it's the exception rather than the rule. So, if you're desperate for a number, you might think about it. But I'd rather, the likes of Bateman, Wilton, Nikora, there's quite a few options. I probably even prefer Madison, to be honest. But I've just put him on the avoid list as well because with Moses getting picked for Origin. Madison's found his way into the sixth jumper this week. Means he's that extra player wider of the ruck, um, or I guess defensively I should say. Will have his hands on the ball a bit more, but you imagine that he'd be doing a lot of distributing and not necessarily a lot of running and kicking and that sort of thing. So, if he gets back into the forward pack rotation, Madison is a great buy, but just the way things have worked out, and the fact that he's coming off that injury, you can just sort of sit back and wait for a bit. So, for that reason, he's an avoid. Into the halfbacks, and top of the buy list this week is Nico Hines. So, if you've been avoiding getting on Nico Hines because of the Origin and that sort of thing, unfortunately, he's found his way out of the side. Perhaps unfairly, but that's not for me to judge. So if you haven't got him, you absolutely have to get him in. Supreme buy coverage is a chance of playing if, say, it doesn't go New South Wales way on next Wednesday. Could find his way into the seven jumper for game three, but even then, you haven't got Cleary anyway. So yeah, if you've been waiting for the right player to come along for Cleary, that's an easy trade. Also got Jerome Hughes on the buy list as a bit of a pod option if you're that way inclined. Had a big game along with a lot of the other Storm, spine last week. So, we'll make a little bit of cash. Obviously, plays this week, which is nice. And then, you could almost hold him till it's time to bring Cleary back in if you are, that way inclined. On the hold list this week, I've got Sean Johnson. If you've got Sean Johnson, you hold him. He was the right trade last week for Nathan Cleary when you weigh everything up. But unfortunately, I was too scared to pull the trigger and suffered because of it. So hold him. I couldn't really find any other holds if I'm being honest. Um, so that's why there's only one listed there. Mitchell Moses I've got on the sell list, so congratulations on making Origin, but that now means that you're only playing one out of the next four rounds. And so obviously, if you've got Hines, or if you haven't got Hines, you get Hines in for Moses. If you have got Hines and Moses, you may hold a week and then trade to Sean Johnson. But that's the way I would definitely attack it. Nathan Cleary, if you've still got him, it's probably because you haven't got Nico Hines, I'd guess. So you get him in. If you were holding like me as well, you could, potentially continue to hold one more week and get Sean Johnson. But yeah, I think you do have to get rid of him, and it's probably worth the two trades to trade him out, trade him back in. And then on the avoids this week, I had about 4 different options, so they're collectively known as the cheapies. So there's quite a few sort of fill-in type options at halfback this week. You've got Jack Cogger at the Panthers, Jonah Pezzett playing six for the Storm, Jacob Arthur playing halfback for Manly now that he's moved there. And the fourth one, Sandon Smith, is coming to the starting side this week for the Roosters. So the reason why I've got them as avoids is there's just real no upside to the picks. Like maybe Pezzett will make a little bit of money, although even then I think he might have come off the bench at some stage and sort of reset his break even a bit with a low score. Um, yeah, the other guys are only really playing this week, and then they've all got buys in round 19. And then after that, the guns should be available for every other game anyway. So, yeah, if you're looking to downgrade in a position, probably hooker looks a good option with, Jake Simpkin. Um, Fainu perhaps in the front row spots. But yeah, aside from that, I don't see too much value this week in terms of cheapies. On to the 5/8s, and top of this list is Matt Burton. Was obviously uh, 18th man in the first game for Origin. But now that Latrell's back, he's sort of shuffled out of the rotation there with his bye coverage and the fact that since he's moved to the seven jumper for the Dogs, his scoring in SuperCoach has been really good and really consistent. I have him as a sort of sneaky pod keeper in the 5/8 position for the run home. And I guess the other sort of sneaky 5/8 pod for the run home that I've got is Kalen Ponga. So similar to Burton, has moved away from the six jumper, and ever since then his scoring has seemed to improve quite dramatically. So yeah, we've got the three sort of guns that we've identified. I guess two now that Dylan Brown's sitting out for a while. But yeah, if you want to look further afield than the obvious Munster Cody Walker combo, I think both these guys could be really great holds for the rest of the season. Speaking of which, on the hold list, I've got Cam Munster. Um, I guess if you bought him in, you know that he's not going to be available during these times of year, so you just hold. Um, if for whatever reason you're desperate for a player, you could potentially trade him to one of the buys. But yeah, if you can, I would recommend holding. On the sell list, so I guess when we recorded the video last week, it wasn't official, but Dylan Brown has been stood down by the NRL under the no fault policy. So if you've got him, he's absolutely a trade out. I believe his court case is still a couple of weeks away, and even then, it might not be resolved so quickly. So by that time, his buy coverage will be not so useful. Cody Walker, I've got on the sell list as well, so maybe a reluctant sell. But given that he's got a bit of an injury, South's upcoming buys, that sort of thing, it could be worth getting out of Cody Walker just for a bit, just to see how it shakes out. As again, there's a couple of good options to bring in, um, and yeah, the buys in the back end of the season, these guys might outscore Cody Walker in the long run. And so under the avoids, so I've got Luke Keary as an avoid, just that general sort of middling dual position type player that's playing this week. And Brandon Wakeham as well. So obviously the Tigers do have that nice buy coverage. He's got the keys to the team now that Luke Brooks is injured for a few weeks. I guess it could also be his audition for the gig long term, with Brooks maybe not being around Tigers next year. But yeah, I just don't think the upside consistently is there with Wakeham. So do like the player, like the guy, former Bulldog legend, but wouldn't have him in the Supercoach team. Onto the centre wing position, and the number one buy I've got this week is actually Nick Meaney. So goal kicking fullback, available this week. It's a bit of a no-brainer. I guess, if you haven't got Ruben Garrick, he might actually be the number one target. He's just ridiculously expensive. So, and will, very quickly get out of hand for those that don't have him. So, for that reason, Meaney's about got the same value, if not potentially more, because of his upside of playing fullback. Um, and I guess, with Cam Munster out, he may take a little bit more responsibility in the side. But yeah, the sort of value for money is there with Nick Meaney. And Jacob Kiraz is the other one. So, the Bulldogs buy coverage is nice. His base is nice. The attacking upside sort of hasn't been there the last few weeks, or since his return. But surely it's got to turn around soon for the Dogs and for my sake. On the what are we on the holds, starting to struggle here. Campbell Graham, if you've got him, I haven't been the biggest advocate of his this season, but if you've got him, you've got to hold him. It looks like again he's got a couple of he's relying on a couple of injuries to find his way into the Origin team. So, he's probably going to play around 19. Um, Obviously, those other buys we've talked about are a concern, but, I think if you've got him, you hold him. And also the likes of Brian Tyre, those sort of guys, that you've got in as keepers for a reason. They're playing Origin, so that's fine. If you've got them, you just hold on to them. On the sell list, I've got Greg Marzu at the top of the list. So a bit of a naughty boy last week and not getting on the bus in time. So for that, he's sitting out this week. Um, while he is a gun, and if you can get 13 without him, perhaps you could hold him. But you know, centre wing seems to be such a high scoring position this year that you want to try to take advantage of it. Excuse me, as much as you can. And I've also got the hammer on the sell list. And this is just, I guess, comes down to the fact that Wayne Bennett will most likely rest him next week. So again, you've got a situation where the Hammer's only playing, 3 games of NRL in about 7 weeks with the Origins, and then obviously the resting afterwards. Um, so you can't have that much money sitting on the bench for so many weeks, in my opinion. On the avoid list, I've got Braden Burns at the top of the list, so it could be a tempting cash grab for a lot of people. But honestly, talking to a few other people and the like, we've got that much money in our squads this year. I think in the back end of the season, it's going to be more about who can conserve the most trades. So, wasting 2 trades to bring Burns in, get some money, and then, trade him out a couple of weeks later. Um, should play this week, should play around 19, but otherwise he is waiting on an injury in the Bulldogs backline to get a consistent run. So I'd avoid him. I'd also avoid Ronaldo Mulatalo. So I guess going into uh, or post the first Origin, I was really looking at targeting some of these Sharks backline players. They do have the upside, but the wheels have sort of fallen off the Sharks a bit the last couple of weeks, and as a result, they've all got quite high break evens. And that's the only reason, like the buy coverage is great, their upside is great, but it's just a money thing, they're going to potentially lose money. So if you can avoid them, and that's Talakai as well, Jesse Ramey and even, they can avoid them this week. They have the buy next week. And then, if their price bottoms out in time for, say, around 19, could be a really nice pod option for the run home. And on to the fullbacks. And the number one again this week at fullback, Dream Buller. If you don't have him, you have to get on him. He is just too good. Will be interesting to see how they go without Luke Brooks, but he covers all the remaining sort of big buy rounds. Has the buy next week, obviously, so you'll need to be able to cover for that. But after that, he's set and forget for the rest of the season. We've also got Gutho on the list after his massive game last week. It's sort of part buy coverage, part cash grab sort of option. Whether I highly doubt he will continue scoring those tons, but he is capable of it. And it is always a bit of a roller coaster ride with him and Moses and those spine players from the Eels. But I think this is the time you get on if you are looking to get on. In saying that, if you've got Reece Walsh, if you've got Tommy Turbo, and probably even if you've got Teddy, I'd suggest holding. So it's hard to squeeze 3 into 2 or even 4 in some cases into 2. So like I've got Gutho as a buy. If you've got any of those other 3 that I've just listed as your second fullback next to Buller, I would highly suggest holding and not bringing Gutho. The one sell, I guess, would be Latrell Mitchell. Um, Combination of high break even, South buy coverage, so many great scoring options available. I think you can take his money, wait for him to dip, and then if you wanted to get him on the way in to the end of the season, you certainly could do that move. And the avoids, so Will Kennedy again had a bit of a stinker last week, so he's going to lose cash over this period of time. There's probably better options. Dylan Edwards as well, plays this week, which is nice, but doesn't play around 19. And again, his scoring is a bit up and down and inconsistent. So, I think the buys are better options than the avoids. So that wraps up the Supercoach stock market for this week. If you've got any comments or thoughts on the buy, keep, sell, avoids for this week, feel free to throw us a comment. If you're enjoying this sort of content, give the video a like and subscribe to the channel. We do the round reviews, we do the stock market every week, and also the round preview, which will be coming up probably tomorrow. But other than that, thank you very much as always for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.